Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Hello, welcome back. We're here today, and we've got a guest, and I'm very excited about our guest because we're talking about something tasty today. But speaking of something tasty, for our random question of the day, Dr. Pomper, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Okay, we're going to roundtable this, but what is your favorite way to eat a fresh summer tomato?
Oh, good question.
Everyone, oh no.
What if he doesn't like tomatoes, Alexis?
If he does, I mean,
awkward
he can.
Right off.
I just called him out for it if he doesn't, but.
Well, my favorite way to eat a tomato in the summertime in Kentucky is I really like the cherry tomatoes, and so that's my favorite. So I have a garden where I always have several varieties of those, and I like, just as I'm watering the plants, I'm eating cherry tomatoes. That's my favorite way to eat those tomatoes.
A reward, right?
Yeah, when they're warm from the sun. So good.
So good.
Do you have do you have a favorite of the cherries that you like the most? Are you like a yellow cherry guy or red?
I'm more of a red. The Sweet 100s. That's really my favorite. I've tried a number of different varieties. That's still my go-to. So
I love that. Yeah, Sun Gold is my personal.
That's
fave.
a good one.
Those are good.
Both of those are good
Cherries.
ones. Yeah. Very sweet, both of those.
Jessica, big tomato lover. Favorite way to eat a summer tomato?
We talk about this often when we would say, "Hey, what'd you bring for lunch at work today?" And be like, "I brought a tomato." Right?
Here it is.
I just love a good tomato sandwich with mayo
Chef's
on
kiss.
it, and like salt and pepper maybe, and maybe some cheese sometimes. Like, I'm very happy with that. I also introduced my children this past weekend to a classic old South Farm manager, a specialty. Daryl Sloan would make sausage and biscuits with a big slice of tomato and onion on it. I introduced my children to that this weekend, and they thought that was the best dinner ever. So we're probably going to have that way more often until tomato season is over. But
cinnamon rolls for breakfast, sausage biscuit with tomato and onion
big slice
for dinner.
Of tomato. Yeah.
What's the bread situation on that tomato sandwich? Is that toasted? Is that white bread, wheat bread, sourdough? What's the vibe you're serving up there?
It's all of the above.
Whatever bread's in my pantry.
There's like six slices of bread stacked together.
Yes.
Just different
for the
taste
sausage
of rainbow.
And biscuit, we actually made homemade biscuits for it. So,
Nice.
But,
very nice.
Yeah. It's all about the tomato, right? So it can be any kind of bread.
You're showcasing it. Yeah.
True.
I like it.
True. Bread is just a vessel. Brett, tomatoes?
I don't really like tomato. No, I'm just kidding. I enjoy tomato. I would say, sandwiches is probably the go-to. We do a sauerkraut and sauerkraut grilled cheese, and then you get that all grilled up, then pop it open, slap your tomato in there because you don't want the tomato to be too warm, and go that way. That's probably my jam these days.
Like that. What about you, Ray?
You guys have not, believe it or not, taken all the good ways to eat tomatoes.
There's so many.
My OG way was just to carry a salt shaker in a truck during tomato season and just jump out and grab them warm. But in dealing with the theme of excess tomatoes, a good tomato pie is hard to beat because it's got lots of mayonnaise in there.
I have not made one of those this year.
I love it. And it's a good way to get rid of a lot of tomatoes and eat all the fat stuff in there too. So a good tomato pie.
Some bacon in it.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, all the things in there.
Can't go wrong. Yeah, I'm a classic tomato with salt. Slice that up.
Okay.
Just coming in because I'm always hot and sweaty, right? It's tomato season, so I come in, I'm hot, I need some salt anyways, and that's just you can't go wrong with that.
And are you then is it sliced? Are you using a fork? Or are you using
slice in my fingers? No fork. No, I want it as little work as possible. Sometimes I just like me and a knife, and
that's
I just
why I eat them in the field.
Primal connection.
I just go in the field because you just you have to have the tomato lean. You have to lean forward to let all the drippings make their way to the soil, and so you just dash salt on there and you do the tomato lean, and juice goes everywhere.
Eat it like an apple, right?
Yeah, just let it go. Let it go.
Yeah,
natural.
one of the things about like tomatoes that are really good when they're vine ripened is they're ephemeral, right? There's just this moment of like it's ripe, and then you go too long and it's not so good anymore. It's a little weird.
There's a point.
And I think the thing we're going to talk about today is it takes that level of ephemeral the beautiful short window of seasonality to a whole nother level. And it's one of the things that makes it magical. It makes it exciting. It brings about a craze in the air this time of year among the local food squad. What are we talking about, Alexis?
Well, they already know this as listeners because they read the intro, but we're talking about pawpaws today. So, but maybe not. Maybe you're just listening endlessly and episodes just keep popping up in your earbuds. So yeah, we're talking about pawpaws today with our resident pawpaw expert, and not just resident, probably one of the top pawpaw experts that we're lucky to have right here in the state of Kentucky, which is Dr. Kirk Pomper, who loves to eat his cherry tomatoes. So welcome, Dr. Pomper.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
We're excited.
I want to know right off, Dr. Pomper, from what I understand, what reading I've done on pawpaws, there's kind of been this undulation of interest in pawpaws. There was a lot real early, and then, came the insurgence of availability of all these exotic fruits. And at one point in time, the interest sort of went down, but now it seems like the interest is pretty high. I mean, is that the case? Because we get lots of questions out in the counties on pawpaws. So, yeah, what's bringing about this increased interest in pawpaws? And, yeah, if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I do think there's, this continuing increase in interest in pawpaw. Really, the last few years, there's been a lot of different events that have occurred too, whether it be Pawpaw Festival. There's the Ohio Pawpaw Festival that's been very successful. Now we've got the Louisville Pawpaw Festival that's happening.
I did not realize that Louisville had a Pawpaw Festival.
Either.
Yeah, it's going to be this coming weekend, which is going to be, I guess, the 7th. It's a Saturday, but it's going to be an annual event in Louisville. And so the first one was last year, and had about 1,500 people come.
Wow.
It was at the Louisville Nature Center. So it's a great opportunity to come out and see pawpaw. Every third Thursday in September, we also have a workshop at the about pawpaw at the KSU farm, and so that's a great opportunity for folks to always plan to come down, walk through the orchards, taste some fruit, and see that. But there's just been an increase, I think, in interest in pawpaw. Maybe some of that's driven by there's just an awful lot of social media out there with people talking about pawpaw now. If you go on Facebook, there's about a half a dozen very large and popular social media sites discussing pawpaw. And so I just think that we're in a time period now where a lot of people know about it. And I was just at the Kentucky State Fair working at a booth there for Kentucky State University, and I was just there about 6 hours, and I had about 25 pawpaw questions. So it's just amazing the number of people who either tasted pawpaw before, had a family member who knew about pawpaw, or just heard about it. And so I think it is just something that we're building. We're continuing to build forward, and a lot of people are very interested in that fruit.
Should we take a step back really quick? And we have a lot of people listening who maybe aren't Kentuckians, who knew, like my family aren't from Kentucky. And so they did not know what a pawpaw was probably until I studied horticulture and was like, this is a Kentucky fruit, So
Kentucky
tell us a
kiwi.
little bit more of what is a pawpaw. And maybe, you've done extensive, really cool things with it. So we'd love to hear a little bit about, what you've done as well.
Sure. So, pawpaw, it's a native fruit to Kentucky. It's a tree fruit. You probably have seen a pawpaw and didn't realize it when you've been walking through the woods. It's a native understory tree. And so a lot of times folks have collected fruit from the patches. It almost looks like a green potato. That's how a lot of people describe it.
That's a good way to describe it, yeah.
Yep. And if you cut it open, it'll have a either kind of yellow to orange flesh. It does have fairly large seeds that you don't want to eat, but the pulp is really good. Sweet, has kind of a banana, mango, pineapple flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with different varieties of apples, the varieties of pawpaws all have a slightly different taste also. And so there's the folks who grow them out in their woods. There's folks who have kind of tried to transplant pawpaws, and then there's kind of the hardcore horticulturists like myself who then tried taking those varieties, growing them under intensive culture in orchards, and that's what we've been doing for a number of years. So we've worked with the nursery industry on how to actually grow them and produce them and propagate them, and then we've been trying to work out what the orchard recommendations should be on how to best grow them, and then we've worked in processing, trying to process that fruit, and then finally trying to breed for even better pawpaws. That's our final part. So that's what I've been doing about 27 years now. Uh, had some administration in there too, but I've never left doing pawpaw, and now I'm back to full-time pawpaw again.
Thank goodness,
are
right?
so interesting. I mean, it's like when I see a pawpaw tree start to yellow up. I grew up in the eastern foothills, and I'm seeing in my mind the pawpaw range map, and maybe you can talk about that just here in a sec. But when I would see the pawpaw trees turn yellow, my father and his parents would say that meant fall. When you start to see that thing turn yellow, that's how I knew it was fall. That and the tomato plants finally started to die, and I was real happy about that because I was sick of those. But when I mean, it was a seasonal indicator for me, and I guess that kind of makes sense with what you were telling us earlier about when they get ripe. But the range of those, Alexis, I guess you grew up where, Pennsylvania,
Well,
or
I'm from northern Kentucky, but my mom's from
your
Pennsylvania.
family rather.
Yeah,
But
they're Yankees up in there, the Yankee
but
Appalachian people.
I was wondering, like, what are the range, if you can paint a picture for us, where pawpaws natively grow? It seems like Kentucky is kind of right in the center of that area, isn't it?
We really are almost right in the center of the native growing range, and basically they require a little bit of chilling, to flower and to break bud, and so you find them kind of in northern Florida and southern Louisiana, as far west as kind of eastern Texas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and then as far north, kind of into southern Iowa and Michigan, into even around Lake Ontario and into New York. And so pretty much the whole East Coast, kind of south from New York, has native pawpaws. And so we're right smack in the middle of the native range. And so there's just a lot of folks have been selecting pawpaws in those areas too. There's probably been more folks who've selected pawpaw varieties in the northern part of the range than the southern. And there's really not a particular reason for that. It's just that it's just kind of what's happened now with our cultivar base. But yeah, there's pawpaws throughout those areas, and so I think that's why so many people, have grandparents or friends or somebody who grew up maybe pawpaw hunting, right, out there in the woods. And we actually have a very popular bumper sticker that says "I'd rather be pawpaw hunting."
I need to know where I can get that, because pawpaw hunting, I mean, they were almost like a folklore tree growing up for us in the eastern part of the state. I mean, they were very highly coveted trees, and so adaptable. Sometimes an understory tree, as you mentioned, a mid-sizer, and sometimes they just did really well out in full sun also. But we knew, I was telling the gang here earlier that we knew on the farm where every single tree was, and we would watch those closely in the fall of the year. Such a neat tree. They really are. They were prized on the farm, those pawpaw trees. Wherever we could find those.
We've kind of touched on it a little bit, and so many people call as an extension agent, call and ask about planting these trees. And I told her I was going to ask this question because it's a question that I always get. We mentioned that they're understory trees, but in the orchard setting, if you go out to KSU, you're seeing them in full sun. And you'll read somewhere in some of the literature, it's like, well, when you first plant them, they need to have some sort of shade or whatever for the first, and I might be, correct me, 2 years or so. Then, then they can go to full sun. Do you need to do that? Does it just depend on the variety? does it depend, like, just how, where you get them started at an early, when they're young trees, or?
Well, they are very sensitive to sunlight when they first emerge, and so like when the seedlings, when they first come up, when the leaves first emerge, they should have shading. Sometimes just being in a greenhouse is enough to kind of reduce the UV rays to be able to produce them. But they should be shaded until they get to about 1.5 feet tall, and after that they don't require shading. Sometimes folks will use these kind of tree shelters, the kind of polyethylene tubes, grow tubes, and those actually work real well with pawpaw. Even with the 1.5 feet tall pawpaws, kind of creates a little greenhouse effect, and they do well. But if they're 1.5 feet tall, they don't really need shading after that. But they do need a lot of irrigation, and they do not take challenges from weeds or grass very well. And I think that's a common problem, is folks maybe don't control the grass or the weeds near their pawpaws, and they will definitely outcompete a pawpaw during establishment early on.
Yeah, it almost sounds like, I'm more familiar on with apple orchards and things. Some of the statements that you just made could almost be applied to apples. But we mentioned that they were a native tree. Does this native tree translate pretty well into an orchard setup? I mean, as far as bringing it into orchards?
It really does. In fact, that's where you're going to have the highest yields too, because, and that's why a lot of folks will email me or my team, and they'll say, "Oh, I've got this pawpaw patch, and I never get any fruit in that patch. Why is that?" And most of the time, it's because it is an understory tree, and so it's underneath the canopy of the larger trees. It just doesn't get enough sunlight to produce enough fruit. And sometimes it's also because they need to cross pollinate, and they tend to sucker a lot. And that's one thing about homeowners. If they're going to put in a pawpaw tree, you do want to control the suckering. And of course, especially if it's a grafted tree, because the root suckers are not going to be genetically the same as the grafted top, right? And there's a third reason you may not get a lot of fruit on your patch, and that's not enough pollinators. And I've actually got a graduate student looking at that right now. We find many insects visiting in April when the flowers are open. It doesn't have the most beautiful flower. It's kind of a red maroon flower. I actually had a person come out and they said, "I want to see the pawpaws in flower." And I think they thought it was going to be like a big cherry orchard, right? And
yeah,
I'm disappointed.
They looked over at the orchard and they said, "When are they going to start flowering?" And I said, "Well, actually, they're in full bloom right now."
So what does that mean?
Flower, though.
They are unique and unique color too.
So more flies and beetles are pollinators of those? Are there? So that would be a lot different than apples, really, then, as far as pollination requirements. Yeah.
Yes. In all the years I've been out in the field in the spring, I've only seen honeybees a couple of times. They really are not main pollinators. So it's flies. Gotcha. I've got a lot of photographs of flies and lady beetles and other insects covered in pollen visiting the flowers. So those are what we think are the pollinators. Now, if you have a patch, you could try and attract flies. And of course, we've heard the stories of folks hauling the roadkill out there. And I always thought, being a scientist, maybe we should do an experiment. It could be, possum, and raccoon, and maybe it's a factorial, so it's both, together in some spots. No, but some people will put chicken out there. They'll put fish. They'll put other things to try to attract more flies to their patch. And so that's can happen. We have a lot of goats at our KSU farms, so we have lots of flies.
Oh, yeah.
So
lucky you.
Yeah. Very interesting. Now, also like apples, with what you've described here, I'm assuming that if you have somebody that's got a prized pawpaw tree, whether native or one of the cultivated varieties, and they want to save seeds, what would you say about that based on what we've kind of been leading up to here as far as being true to type? That wouldn't be, would it?
Correct. And that's the way I usually describe it in the talks, just like your children are not just like you. The seeds of these varieties are also going to be different. They may be similar, but they're not going to be the same. And so some folks are selling, they'll say, improved strain seed, and it's true that if you have seed from Susquehanna or KSU Atwood or some of the other better varieties, maybe you'll have a better chance of getting a better seedling, but you also may get a seedling that does not taste good, right? And that's why we've been cloning in horticulture a long time with our grafting techniques and layering and unfortunately the only clonal technique that really works for propagating pawpaw cultivars is grafting and budding. That's we don't really use tissue culture. It doesn't. Rooting of cuttings does not work. Layering does not work. But at least we do have one method of taking the best varieties and propagating them on at least seedling rootstock. So that's what those seeds are good for. You just mentioned they could be good rootstock. Right?
Gotcha. I wondered about that. If there was a specific type of rootstock like apples that would be semi-dwarfing or dwarfing, is there anything like that, or is it just the native rootstocks that you're basically grafting the signwood onto?
Well, I actually looked at some. We have some pawpaws that have more vigor than others. Susquehanna tends to lack vigor, and Sunflower tends to be vigorous. And those are two pawpaw varieties that are out there. And so I've tried growing out seed of those, and I did think I had seen some vigor differences in the seed, but once I went out to the field and with science on those rootstocks, there was no difference. And so at this point, I think the best point you just made is locally sourced seed for nurseries. So if you're buying from one of our local nurseries, if seed came from Kentucky, then that's a really good thing. It's adapted to this region. I know a lot of nurseries sell nationally, and that's just the way it is. But locally sourced seed for rootstock is at least going to give you a better chance of having a good establishment of your tree.
And I notice you guys have on the Kentucky State University website, as far as especially for our Kentucky listeners, you have some very good resources for locally available stock. And I'm assuming that's still the case. That's still up on the website.
Yes.
If someone's in the state, they can buy specifically from in-state sources, sounds like.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep. And I say their names right now, but I guess I shouldn't on the podcast. But we have some really good.
Yeah, there'll be some links to everybody on there.
One thing I just want to reiterate that you mentioned was that they need to cross pollinate. I think a lot of people forget that, and then you also mentioned that they're thicket forming, which leads to the fact that people can be like, I have this huge patch of pawpaws and I never see any pawpaws. So is there, when we think about apples cross-pollinating, right? Not every apple cross-pollinates because it depends on bloom time. Are there considerations for people wanting to go buy certain pawpaws that they should think about?
There are, and I guess, there's several things we've actually been kind of looking into. I guess I will say the self-fruitfulness of pawpaw versus self-incompatibility, and we're actually doing some DNA marker work on the seedlings that come from the trees. And it's true that at some low level there will be some selfing. It's kind of like an apple where they talk about self-fruitfulness. You get a few fruit, but you won't get many fruit. And that's probably the case with a number of pawpaw varieties, but you're going to get the highest fruit set with cross-pollination. We don't really have really good recommendations for all the pawpaw varieties right now, as which would be best pollinizers for which. But the rule of thumb is to plant at least 3 varieties. That way you're maximizing the possibility of having good crossing between the trees and getting high fruit set.
I have to brag for a second. When I was an agent, probably, let's see, I don't know, 8 years ago, I did a class on pawpaws as a brand new agent. And it was one of the biggest classes I ever did, and was so exciting as someone who hadn't been there for very long. And we did a whole series of garden to table, which we can talk about, sort of the okay, you picked it part of it here in a sec. But people probably about 2 years ago a couple people started bringing in things that they made from pawpaws, and it was so rewarding, and they were so excited because we gave them trees that and some seed as well that we got from you all, and some recipes that we got from Kentucky State, and they were just so excited when they started, and they would bring us into the extension office treats, little pawpaw treats, and I can tell you there is such thing as eating too much pawpaw. The body sometimes will reject that. But fun
Sounds
fact.
like somebody ate a lot of pawpaws, Alexis.
Somebody has experience.
I reject the premise. We had a couple of months ago, we had the question, or a couple of weeks ago, we had the question of how many peaches is too many peaches for one person to eat. And it was entirely hypothetical, not based on my own experience of worrying as I approach the human limit. But
no, there is a human limit, because I believe, if I remember correctly, we learned pawpaws are like a bit of a diuretic. Is that correct? Or something along those lines?
If you eat, it's just like anything else. If you eat enough of them, they may have that effect. And I will say, just in terms of use of pawpaw, a lot of times we're extracting the pulp out. We're using the pulp in pie and jams, ice cream. Makes great ice cream, of course.
It does.
One thing that folks have been trying is trying to make a fruit leather or freeze drying the fruit. And I'm just going to tell you and the audience that's not something you should do with pawpaw, because for some reason, and we don't really understand why, we think it's some kind of oxidation event. It kind of will make you sick to your stomach then to eat fruit leather or freeze-dried pawpaw. And you can eat 10 times or 100 times that amount fresh, but when you eat it freeze-dried or as a leather, it tends to make your stomach sick. And I think it's some kind of oxidation event of it's a very rich fruit. Something's going on there, but that's one thing people ask me, can I make a fruit leather and sell it? And I'm going to say, no, you probably should.
You better not. You can sell it once.
Right.
Yeah. Sell as a dietary supplement.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, Alexis, 8 years? Is that the typical time from, I know it's probably quicker from sapling rather than seed, but is that a typical production window around 6 to 8 years? As far as getting pawpaw that's, up to bearing age?
Yeah. These were from plants. So
from plants. Gotcha. So around that time then. Gotcha. Yeah. We get that question some. Yeah.
Go through a period of juvenility. Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to, you've already mentioned several things, several great tips for someone that may want to put pawpaws at home, 3 varieties, but any comments on, and water those when they're young, of course, that's a pretty common recommendation. But how about spacing? If you're going to lay out, do you have to worry about things like frost and specific spacing if someone's going to put out a small planting at home, or even a commercial planting for that matter?
Sure. I think the rule of thumb is kind of what you would do with other tree fruit like apples or peaches probably stands for location for pawpaw. You don't want to go down to the lowest area down by the creek where we're in the valley, because that's where all the cold air is going to flow and you might lose your blossoms to frost in the spring. But otherwise, we usually recommend 8 feet between trees and about 14 to 16 feet between rows. They really do form almost a hedge at maturity, and that's probably not a bad thing, because they are native understory tree. If they're getting a little shading from the other hedge of pawpaws next to them, that's probably not a bad thing. And so you can have about 295 trees per acre at that spacing. And I guess that for the homeowner, you really don't want to go more than, you don't want to, 8-foot spacing would be a good thing, but you don't want to have it be more than about, 50 feet or 75 feet, because if that fly, is going to make it from one tree to another, you don't want to get lost on the way, right? They're lethargic pollinators.
Because the type of pollinator which is different. That is a different thing to appreciate, is that it is a different kind of pollination scenario. So don't go too far from one tree to the other. Yeah. Makes perfect sense, I guess.
They're a really pretty landscape tree. I've done a lot on like edible landscapes, and just talking to people about like native landscapes and stuff like that. And even for people who necessarily don't want the fruit, it's still like a really nice tree. I think an alternative to just a red bud or a dogwood or something. The fall color on those is really beautiful.
And I've seen those kind of pyramid shaped, but and I've seen them both pruned and unpruned in an orchard setting. Is there any comment there as far as central leader versus open vase versus not touching them much at all?
So we did actually have an experiment where we looked at central leader training versus basically minimal pruning, we'll call it.
Great.
And so that central leader is the best way to form a tree that's not going to be damaged in wind, because otherwise with the minimally pruned trees, they really will get these kind of narrow branch angles, and they'll tend to get wind damage, because that's one problem with pawpaw is you might get two big fruit clusters on one limb and there'll be no fruit clusters on the other limbs of the tree, right? And then the wind comes and it breaks that branch, and so
they're unbalanced.
So you want to have a strong branch angle. So central leader's a good way to do that. It really is.
Gotcha.
It delays flowering by maybe a year, but I think it's most of the flowering, but it's worth that time.
It's worth it in the long run to do that.
So,
and go ahead, Alexis.
Well, we've kind of hinted at the ways you use pawpaw, and what is the biggest drawback? Like, why isn't it a bigger, commercially available fruit for those people who don't have experience?
Right. Well, pawpaw is biggest problem is still the same problem that was around probably back around the turn of around 1915 when they were having contests trying to find the best pawpaw. It's very perishable, and it basically it's going to last maybe at best a week at room temperature, and it's more like 3 to 4 days when it's ripe, and it needs to be refrigerated, and even when it's refrigerated, we usually keep them in plastic bags so they don't respire too much or transpire too much, and they'll maybe last 2 weeks. So it's luckily you do harvest. Now, I think we talked about in April, they flower April into May. The same tree will flower over a long period of time, and hence you're going to be harvesting fruit over a long period of time. Usually starting last week of August through September, but you will have your tails and your concentration of ripening. But basically, it's going to be a limited window when you can actually eat the fruit. So processing is really the future for pawpaw. Even in processing, you have to get the fruit to the processing unit, and they do get bruised quickly if you're not careful, right? That's our problem. Bruising causes off flavors. So that's really the biggest challenge right now with pawpaw is trying to keep the fruit longer. And I've got a student who's looking at controlled atmosphere right now, trying to look at storage again. And then we'd like to find a firm pawpaw, one that doesn't bruise very readily. And there's one that's a little firmer than others, and that's Susquehanna. But it's not firm enough yet. It still has damage. If it's you can pack these in bubble wrap. You can put them in foam, and they're still gonna, if you ship them one of the overnight express folks, it's still gonna have some damage. It's just a very fragile fruit when it gets ripe, and that's kind of the challenge with pawpaw is that it's just like your tree ripened peach. You don't ship that very far either, right? Same
yeah.
thing.
And it seems like the flesh of a pawpaw is it's almost like an avocado. It's without that harder rind on there. So yes, so they go down quick.
So when harvesting, right, we all have heard the going out picking up pawpaws, put it in my pocket kind of thing. Most people are talking about like they don't harvest them until they see them hit the ground. But in your situation, like in a more orchard situation, are you guys like, how are you, they're so fragile, right? You don't want to like grab them and squeeze them and cause them to bruise. And are you just looking for like color change, or are you just banking on getting ones that fall, or how are you guys out there harvesting them?
So we go out every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we do go through the tree. We kind of give it a little shake sometimes, but otherwise we're going to go through and we are going to kind of feel for softness, and it's not wonderful. And I wish we had a reliable color break in some of these varieties. Some never turn yellow at all, right? And they're still soft.
Rude.
And but I wish we had that. Really do.
So is it the firmness that's the best? I mean, that's one of the questions we commonly get from homeowners. They'll ask, is it the firmness or the color that we should rely on more? I mean, if you were talking to a homeowner, would you go by the firmness then? as a more reliable
Absolutely.
indicator?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
gotcha.
It's firmness. Yep.
Yeah. My experience was with if you do have one that does turn dark as it gets older, and they eventually will. I mean, by that time, they're going to hit the ground. They're going to be like me when I was growing up. I would be in the bushes fighting raccoons and possums for the pawpaws, and it's not a good rumble match. I was always, I would come and see the wildlife, and they would scurry away, and I'd see all the pawpaws laying on the ground, and that was not a good situation to be in. If I'd have known then what I now know from you, I would have been much better off. I would have been testing those when they're up in the tree with my, I guess, just giving them a little squeeze to see if they're getting soft. Yeah. Would have been much better, sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some people like them when they, it's just like a banana when they really get very ripe and they'll turn brown, and they do get kind of a caramel flavor at that point, which some people really like and others don't like. And so that's almost a change of the pawpaw flavor as it overripens too. But yeah, best way to do it is actually go through the tree and get the softening ones, and then maybe let it further ripen and soften inside on your kitchen table.
It's a good way to keep them away from the raccoons and possums and squirrels and everybody and their brother who loves pawpaws.
As much as wildlife likes those, I never saw deer eat pawpaws. Do deer really eat pawpaws? I see the smaller critters, but not deer. I don't know if that's just something I was observing falsely, or is that the case?
They will eat the fruit if offered.
They will.
They won't seek it out. I knew a person who had planted a pawpaw orchard, and unfortunately it was a drought, and they had micro sprinkler irrigation on the pawpaw, so they were green, and so the deer, of course, went through the field and ate anything green, and so they destroyed his pawpaw orchard. So they will do that. They will rut, the horns on the small trees. They will do that. That's probably the most damage that you will have from deer is them rubbing their antlers on the tree and girdling it.
I never did understand why deer just absolutely love specifically pawpaw trees. Is it something about the branching structure or what? But they will seek out. It seems like if there's 20 trees, they'll go to the pawpaw every time. It's interesting that deer just love those. I mean, so that's a problem. Any other common problems that potential future growers or current growers or homeowners should watch out for on pawpaws? I see a lot of trunks painted white, and they seem to be fairly thin-skinned. Is there a reason for that, for the painting of the trunks?
Yeah, and actually that's something that we've really encountered is basically it's Southwest injury, and pawpaw is very susceptible to that. So for those who don't know what that is, it's in the wintertime, if your tree is hardened off, say in February, but then you get a really sunny day and it warms up one side of the trunk, and that dehardens that part of the trunk basically, and then it'll plunge down to some cold temperature, and it will actually kill then some of those cells of the cambial layer on that part of the tree. So the idea is if you paint the trunk white, it'll reflect some of that sunlight and it won't warm up as much, and so you won't lose that cold hardiness of that side of the tree. Otherwise it will die, and it basically girdles the tree, so you get a lot of damage that way. The only real, I think pawpaw now is being grown in larger and larger amounts. Like any monoculture, we will have more insect and disease issues pop up. But right now, there's only two major issues, I will say, and that's the phylosticta. It's a black spot that shows up on the leaves and the fruit. It just detracts from the appearance. Not usually a problem, but if it's really a wet year, it will kind of have black spot on the fruit, and you'll get cracking sometimes. Then that's bad. It'll ruin the fruit. And the other problem is Asian ambrosia beetle. Now, luckily, it's not been a common thing, but we have had a number of growers where Asian ambrosia beetle will go in, and what they'll do is they'll go into the tree, they'll lay eggs, they bring with it ambrosia fungus that the young feed on, and then that goes in and causes a wilt to the tree. So I found a tree dying just from one entry point even. And so it is a problem across the nursery industry too, but it's very devastating to pawpaw. Now, luckily, it hasn't been that many. There have been a couple of plantings in Kentucky that have had that happen, but then it's been able to be controlled, but it's a tough one. It really will cause a lot of damage.
That's scary.
Well, so I find myself in this situation quite a lot, and here we are again, me with 4 plant nerds, and here I am as more of a person nerd, or maybe just a general purpose nerd. I don't know. But I'm if you're talking to somebody who's maybe not heard of Pawpaw, or they're thinking about it, or they've heard about it and they don't understand, I'm just curious what you think, and this is open to anybody. What you think of? I perceive that the Pawpaw kind of captures the imagination of a lot of people, or the enthusiasm of a lot of people. I think that there's crossovers into, as Alexis mentioned, as a landscape plant, or as an option for a small tree, small to medium tree in, around your house. I've seen it at tree sales and tree giveaways and stuff like that. But then also about the fruit, the history. I think that there's I describe it as an almost botanical resistance to commodification, that I think it gives people something that they really are missing in life. Like, it feels like a distinctly human tree. What do you all think? Like, why do you think it is that people get so excited about Pawpaw? I mean, I'm not questioning it.
Banana mango, Brett. Banana mango. To me, I mean, it's like a banana mango. I mean, I love the flavor of it, but you're right. It's we get lots of, it's kind of like a tropical fruit, except it's right here at home, and we have a lot of people, Brett, that from that angle you're approaching that question from, is they love the fact that it's a native. And they love that, it's something, that they can grow as such. So not only does it taste good, it's a native tree. So win-win there. Yeah.
It's native. It's unique. You can't find it you can't find it everywhere. You can't just go to the grocery and find it. Occasionally this time of year, like I've seen where some like Whole Food, like kind of stores have been advertising it right now. Mm-hmm. But besides that, so it's kind of special when somebody's like, oh, I have pawpaws. Right.
Yeah. It's something. Yeah.
People get excited about it because it's not something as, so-and-so has an apple tree. Well, my neighbor has an apple tree. And so, like,
it's like the pumpkin spice of fruit. People are just pumped about it.
Yeah.
'Tis the season for it.
It's almost like its own club. People that know Pawpaws, they know Pawpaws. They seek out the ice cream at the KSU events and things. They seek out and know how to use, and they know a variety of recipes, like for breads. And I had someone inform me that any recipe that pretty much calls for banana, they use Pawpaw. If they can get the Pawpaw paste, and they've extracted that out, they use that paste for any recipe for bananas. I thought that was pretty neat. So, and I just that'd probably make some interesting banana bread, except Pawpaw bread. Has anybody had anything like that? Like the bread made out of that?
Hence the reason.
I have not.
Issues.
I am lacking. I can't believe I've not had that product.
I've had the jam before. And
jam,
of course the ice cream.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the ice cream is so good. It's very good.
What's your favorite way to enjoy Pawpaw, Dr. Pomper?
Well, I really do think it's probably out in the field. I mean, sometimes we would talk about when it's really warm and you have a ripe pawpaw and you cut it open and you taste it. It is almost a euphoric experience sometimes. And we've kind of jokingly said, is there some type of substance here, because it really tastes that good. And it's just, something about the flavor profile and the aromatics and the warmth, it really is. But it is truly a pleasure to work with the enthusiasts of Pawpaw. There are many, many very enthusiastic Pawpaw hunters out there, and people who are planting Pawpaws, and so it has been a pleasure to be around them. Lots of enthusiasm, lots of hope, and it really is almost a following. And next year we're going to have our 5th International Pawpaw Conference, and we've spaced it so you can go to the Ohio Pawpaw Festival first, then come to our conference, and then go on to the Ohio Pawpaw Festival. So if it's almost like a
Pawpalooza.
Like the great
I love it.
You can do that if you'd like to. No.
That's Brilliant. Amazing. Yeah, so you're going to get a you're going to get a crowd that's just gonna just binge pawpaws for a period of time.
Well, I'm wondering, I don't know where you are in the planning, but if you could maybe work in a special feature event of Ray wrestling raccoons as part of the Pawpaw Festival.
Yes.
That could draw. I mean, I would definitely.
I'd pay money for that. Yeah,
I would go to that.
Absolutely.
And I will sign the disclaimer that all of my shots are up to date. I will sign that.
That'll be very important for the raccoons,
Yeah, that would be very important for the raccoons and possums. Yes, absolutely.
I would be concerned.
You alluded to this, but I just want to make sure we emphasize, that Kentucky State University and Dr. Pomper specifically are nationally and internationally known, like recognized as leaders in this field of exploring pawpaws and maintaining them and exploring the biodiversity, but also just sort of sharing the magic that is these trees. And that's something that's really, it's awesome because, as we're all, again, extension folks, as you know, and the cooperative extension system in Kentucky is Kentucky State University and University of Kentucky. So being able to have that kind of brand, fruit brand, I guess, that brand visibility or that renown, it's really, really cool to be, frankly, to be known for something besides bourbon and horses in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. It's really something I really value and have always appreciated about KSU and about the work that you've done, Dr. Pomper. So, I just want to make sure we shout that out explicitly and loudly and as many times as we can, that we have something really special in that regard here.
Well, thank
you. There might not be Pawpaw ice cream without you.
I mean, I cannot imagine what the Spaniards or whatnot came over and observed Native Americans, and they were the first, in the 1500s and tried this thing, and they're like, what in the world is this magical fruit? It's like not the fountain of youth, but maybe the fountain of fruit. I don't know. But I imagine that would be, having not tasted anything like that. I've not tasted anything close to pawpaws, really. It's that unique. It's such a great product. So, yeah. I could see why these cultures, I guess the history goes back a long way, doesn't it? As far as the history of, pawpaw consumption, that goes way back, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you can go back and, DeSoto wrote about, seeing the Native Americans eating pawpaw, and go back to Lewis and Clark writing in their journal how pawpaws helped, when they were short on rations, when they were coming back from Oregon, that they ate pawpaws. And there's some of the early settlers wrote about pawpaws and how eating pawpaws was a pleasure. So there's definitely a tie back in history, and there's Chris Daniel Boone. There's lots of folks who are purported pawpaw fans, but there's definitely a history there, and there's a Kentucky history. I usually talk about this. Pawpaw is in a lot of different things. If you go to the historical marker that talks about the Hatfield-McCoy feud, there's actually a historical marker because as part of that, some of the folks were actually tied to pawpaw trees as part of that family feud. And so that's actually on the historical marker. And so, there's just pawpaws in a lot of different places in their history. And I guess luckily for most of it, it's good because it's the pawpaw fruit is what we're worried about. But there's it's a very interesting fruit. It has a lot of history, and I guess that's what people look at. And the promise is so strong, and that's why I think why people are so enthusiastic about pawpaw. It's so unique, and they want to take it to that next level. Whether it's going to be another added food item as a drink or a ice cream or whatever that we see commercially. And it's really just a cultivar or a few methods away from actually probably trying to take it larger. But as you talked about earlier, there's a lot of people who don't want it to get any bigger than it is right now because it's this unique fruit that people like having at this stage, and it has a lot of allure for that.
Please tell me that there's a contest somewhere, either in the U.S. or abroad, of a pawpaw seed spitting contest. Please tell me that. I would love, because those seeds are pretty epic, and they can be in certain, types of pawpaw, I guess.
I think they may actually.
I need to look it up. I need to look that
up.
Yeah.
Have it at one of those festivals.
Because
if they don't, all this training is going to have been for nothing, Ray.
Nothing. I was like, I'm going to be if I'm the only one, I'm going to be so disappointed. That's how I'd eat them as a kid. I'd pop the whole thing in my mouth, and you work around the seeds and extract naturally in your mouth all the good stuff. And then you just start rapid fire spitting those things at your nearest sibling or tree, just whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So little tidbit there. You're welcome.
There's a lot of stories about Ray like being mean to his brothers on this podcast. I feel like we need to get Frankie on here to tell us all the mean things you did to him.
I also threw tomatoes at them too. We threw tomatoes at each other. So.
Speak the truth on what really happened, right?
Yeah,
my favorite way to eat tomatoes is throwing them at my brother.
Yes, that's my favorite form of consumption. And pawpaws, now you know. So so cool. The discussion, I knew it would be a cool discussion today on pawpaws. It truly is a unique thing. When you mention it, people either don't know what they are or they very well know what they are. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Cool. Well, any lasting thoughts from you, Dr. Pomper, that people might want to know about what you're doing or pawpaws in general, tips and tricks, anything just to kind of set us off on the right path?
Well, I'd encourage anybody who hasn't had a pawpaw to seek one out and try it, and find out what we're talking about. I think that's a first step. And there are a lot of nurseries out there selling pawpaws now, so they are expensive because there's such demand. But I think it's worth buying some grafted trees and experimenting at your house or farm with a few trees and seeing what it's all about. But I hope you'll take advantage of the at the website at KSU and come out to our third Thursdays. And as I said, we have the International Pawpaw Conference coming up. But I'm excited about pawpaw. I think we're gonna have a couple of new varieties released next year to add to our KSU Atwood, KSU Benson, KSU Chappelle right now, and I think we'll have 2 more that we're gonna release, and so that'll be next year. But I'm happy about pawpaw, and as I said, most of the time I would rather be pawpaw hunting, and that's what I'm doing.
That is awesome. Well, we will make sure to put a link to that awesome website. I know that as agents, all of us use that extensively when trying to teach and do our best with all the great information you had out there. And I know it really guided anytime I had questions asked or programs I wanted to do. So I'm just really grateful that you all have such awesome information and are kind of the lead for that information. And I mean, there's pawpaw trees that say KSU in the name. That's pretty impressive in my mind. And there's multiple of them. That's big time, all right, in my opinion. But so we're really grateful for all that. We'll make sure to put that in there. If people have very specific questions, maybe they're wanting to put in commercial, other than that third Thursday, is there the best way to get contact with your team?
Via email is probably the best. It's kirk.pomper@kysu.edu. And of course, Sherry Crabtree has been with me about 25 years. She's a research and extension associate in horticulture, working with pawpaw all that time. And then Jeremy Lowe is also a research associate here. So if you want to email any of us, our email is on the website also. We'd be happy to get back to you via email. And just reach out to us, and or you'll see us at one of these events, and we'll be able to talk to you there.
I mean, who wouldn't want to go to one of those events? Because there's usually taste testing involved, so highly recommend checking that out. But I believe that is all we have for you today, and we hope that as we grow this podcast, you will grow with us and maybe grow some pawpaws while you're at it. Thanks for being here, y'all.